Imagine being perfectly positioned to make billions of dollars off of a global pandemic. Even more scary, imagine being positioned perfectly to do it again. In this video, we're going to talk about the coronavirus vaccine, who are the big players in the space, how the vaccine got funded, how much it cost, how much companies have already made in pre-orders, and where we are today. There's no better place to start than from the beginning. So, in late 2019, there was an outbreak in Wuhan, China. Sources say that it started in a seafood market in Wuhan. This is where everything started, that caused a global pandemic that affected the whole entire world. Believe it or not, there was a time that you didn't have to walk down the street grilling a person in front of you to see if they had these deadly germs that you didn't want to be infected with. You didn't have to sit outside in the freezing cold to enjoy your meal. And most importantly, you didn't have to wear a mask outside every single day. This would all change on March 11th, 2020, when WHO, better known as the World Health Organization, declared the coronavirus a global pandemic.
And we're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
And this is at the point that there was so much uncertainty around this virus. Like, no one really knew what to expect. People know that there were people losing their lives, and obviously you don't want to be in that position. So this caused people to do some things that they probably wouldn't do in other situations, or if they were thinking more rationally. Got to the point that people were wearing masks, gloves. People were actually outside in full super suits, like hazmat suits, to make sure that no germs entered their body. And to be honest, I don't blame them. Like, this is something that you didn't know what to do and you wanted to protect yourself, so why not? The capitalists came out in full force. They were selling custom masks. They were selling masks with designs on them, masks with patterns on them. People still are making a lot of money off of that today. They were selling hand sanitizer, wipes, bleach, Clorox, anything that could potentially stop the virus from entering your body or could potentially make your house more clean. It was being sold. This also created a new industry that probably wasn't that new, but became a lot more profitable because of Corona, the work from home space. People were selling everything from ergonomic chairs to blue light glasses to ergonomic desks to standing desks. Needless to say, a lot of money was made as a result of this. But then people started to wonder, when is life going to get back to normal? Like, this is fun, you know, some people were able to benefit from unemployment and certain things that were able to financially support them for the time being, but everyone wanted to get back to their regular lives. There were things that they missed or things that they enjoyed doing that they no longer could do because of a global pandemic. And it was honestly an excuse for some. Some people got an opportunity to refresh, rethink certain things and decisions in their lives, and got some clarity for some time. But everybody, to a certain degree, wanted life to go back to normal. And this is where the vaccine talk first began. So the typical timeline for a vaccine is about 10 to 15 years. But the record for creating a vaccine was 4 years. And if you're like me, I doubted that we were going to have a vaccine anytime soon. But then in May 2020, Donald Trump came out with Operation Warp Speed, which was a plan to shorten the typical vaccine time to have a vaccine in about 1 to 2 years.
It's called Operation Warp Speed. That means big and it means fast.
The plan was to have multiple companies create viable vaccines that we can now use to vaccinate the population. So they started and they accepted 93 potential vaccines from over 80 pharmaceutical companies. Ultimately, 4 big companies were able to rise to the mainstream quickly. Those 4 companies were Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, Pfizer/BioNTech, and AstraZeneca. So let's first go and talk about funding. So the vaccine was funded in 2 big ways. There was money that came from the public sector, and there was money that came from the private sector. When it comes to public sector funds, that was clearly for the focus of actually developing the vaccines. From the private sector, these were people that wanted to invest in the space and wanted to make some money off of this opportunity. Believe it or not, it happens. So Johnson & Johnson received $952 million, Moderna received $2.3 billion, Pfizer/BioNTech received $2.7 billion, and AstraZeneca received $9.9 billion. This was simply for funding to create the vaccine and to do the studying and research required in order to now get this vaccine produced. Now, let's go into the cost. Cost is very important because someone has to pay for this, and who is going to pay for the vaccine? In most cases, the government is going to pay for the vaccine, but let's break down the prices. So, Johnson & Johnson's vaccine costs $10 a dose, while Moderna's vaccine costs anywhere from $25 to $37 a dose. Pfizer/BioNTech's vaccine costs $19 a dose, and lastly, AstraZeneca's vaccine costs anywhere from $4 to $8 a dose. At face value, these numbers aren't that big, like they're relatively cheap to be honest for a vaccine, but you have to realize that the quantity of these vaccines are so high. There's hundreds of millions of people that have to get vaccinated, 1. 2, the majority of these vaccines, except for Johnson & Johnson, require you to get 2 doses. So for Moderna, that $25 to $37 quickly becomes $50 to $74. For Pfizer/BioNTech, that $19 quickly becomes $38. For AstraZeneca, that $4 to $8 quickly becomes $8 to $16. And the quantity, once again, is in the hundreds of millions. So these companies stand to make a lot of money. But there's been companies that said that they're not going to profit during pandemic times. How noble of them, right? At the same time, I think it would be very ignorant to assume that some of these companies are not going to be making a lot of money regardless. Johnson & Johnson has already started off as the first company to be able to start turning a profit. Based on pre-orders, Johnson & Johnson has pre-orders about $1.2 billion worth of pre-orders. If we do the math, it only costs them $952 million to get the vaccine funded, but they already have $1.2 billion in pre-orders. Moderna, Pfizer/BioNTech, and AstraZeneca, they have not yet started to make a profit, but they still have pretty sizable pre-orders. Moderna has $780 million in pre-orders. Pfizer/BioNTech has $1.28 billion in pre-orders. And lastly, AstraZeneca has $3.29 billion in pre-orders. So when we're comparing the vaccines to see what's going on, what's the situation, Johnson & Johnson at face value seems like it has the advantage because you only need 1 dosage. But the vaccine efficacy, which is basically just a fancy way of saying effectiveness, is unknown at the time. Also, Moderna and Pfizer/BioNTech kind of has the advantage because they have 95% vaccine efficacy, which is obviously attractive because if you're putting something in your body to cure something, you want to know that it's going to work. And then we have AstraZeneca, which sits at the bottom right now with 70% vaccine efficacy. And this to me is personally funny because they received the most funding, got the most pre-orders, but for some reason they have the least effective vaccines. Like, make it make sense. Now that we've went over the funding, the cost, and the pre-orders, where are we today? Some companies, like we said earlier, specifically Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca, said they will not profit during pandemic times, but I'm telling you, some CEOs are going to get very rich, trust me. And I don't want to take your mind there, but if in this situation these big companies could come together and create these vaccines to save the world, what now stops a company in the future from saying, why don't I just cook up a little something in the lab, release it, and then I'm sitting on $100 million or $100 billion in the future? Who knows, right? These situations, I feel personally, should have some type of regulation going forward or some type of transparency, because there's people right now taking the vaccines that, to be honest, don't even know what's in the vaccines or have that much transparency about the situations. Also, pharmaceutical companies are notorious for price gouging and charging exuberant prices. So how do we regulate things like that in the future? I don't know. These are just some questions, some food for thought, but I hope you enjoyed this little video essay. This is the first time we're trying something like this on the channel. Go ahead and subscribe if you like it. Leave a like, leave a comment. Tell us anything we could do better going forward. Our whole goal is to touch on business topics, economic topics, and really put out the best information possible. If you're gonna go get vaccinated, I hope you stay safe, hope you do your research, and I hope everything goes well. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we're out.